Hi, I'm Ryan Barba, and today I want to talk to you about the best practices for addressing a low GMAT or GPA in the optional essay in your MBA admissions application, right? Most schools, if not all schools in the top 15, top 20, will give you the opportunity to answer an optional essay. Some of them will leave it wide open and say, if there's anything else you want to tell us, go ahead and tell us. Others will say, if there are any weaknesses in your application that you wish to address, go ahead and do it here, basically. So I want to talk today specifically about how to use that optional essay to address any concerns that the admissions committee might have because of a low GMAT or GPA specifically, okay? There's a four-part formula or process that I think you ought to follow in this optional essay, and I've written it here on the board. And your essay should follow this sequence, right? When I was working in MBA admissions at Cornell and Keene and Flagler, I was most often compelled and convinced when I saw a sequence or an argument structured this way, and now as I've coached potential candidates as an MBA admissions consultant, I always coach them to use this structure, and so it always comes out really persuasive and looking really great. So here's what you want to do. So if you have a low GMAT or a low GPA, first thing you want to do at the beginning of the essay is acknowledge that that's the case, right? Basically start off by saying, hey, listen, I know my GPA or my GMAT is lower than the average at your school, and I want to take the time and address why that is in this essay, right? So on and so forth. Whatever words you choose to use, start off by saying, hey, I know there's a problem, let's talk about it, okay? It shows self-awareness, that you understand that there's a weakness in your application and it sets the context for the essay. So it's a good introduction to acknowledge first that there's an issue and that you have something you want to talk about or some things you want to talk about. Next, explain what happened, right? This is different than making an excuse. You do not want to take the tone of, oh, woe is me, nothing ever goes my way, these terrible things happened to me, and this was just somebody else's fault or a reflection of circumstances that were completely out of my control, and you'll blame them, it has nothing to do with me. You know, no, you want to take responsibility for what happened, but you can provide an explanation for why that was, right? So for example, in my freshman year of college, unfortunately, my father came down with cancer, and I was forced to commute home every weekend to take care of him, and obviously that took an emotional toll on me. Okay, that's an explanation, right? You're not saying it was somebody else's fault. It's a reflection of something outside of me. It's saying, hey, listen, I had a choice. I could postpone college or drop out of school for a semester or two to attend to my father and his needs and be part of the family, or I could try to battle through. It was a difficult decision for me. I decided to try to do both. And it was very emotional, it was very difficult, and unfortunately during my freshman year of college, my academic performance suffered as a result, okay? That's an explanation. You're explaining what happened. If it's a GMAT issue, maybe you're explaining, maybe you were going through a tough time when you were taking the test, or maybe your explanation is simply that you've never been a great test taker. I mean, that's actually true for a lot of people, and there's something logical about that explanation, and say, I've just never been great at standardized testing. It's just not a strength of mine. Unfortunately, I took the test 2 or 3 times. I wasn't able to see any measurable gains. So unfortunately, it is what it is, but this is just a weakness of mine that is what it is, right? So providing an explanation, whatever that is, make it as compelling as you can. But again, not making excuses, providing an explanation for why it is, why it happened, so on and so forth. But then reflect. This is the part that a lot of people miss, right? If you had a low GPA in college, or maybe you had a work gap, I know that's not part of the scope of this video, but reflect on what you've learned about yourself or what you've learned about life or success because of this experience, right? So, despite the fact that I struggled during my freshman year of college, upon reflection, I've really learned that I can overcome and that I'm a fighter And even though I didn't perform that well academically, I did get through this, and it's made me stronger as a person. And going through that experience with my dad has given me a new perspective and vibrancy of life to live each day to the fullest and really go out there and crush it and take advantage of whatever opportunity is given to you. So while looking back at that time, it was a dark time, it was a sad time, and it was a time that cost me academically, I'm actually not too sorry about it because it was a big part of me and me becoming more mature. Right? That's you reflecting, and it's your way of saying, this is a bad thing that happened, but some good came from it, and in a way, it makes me a stronger candidate. Okay, that's what your reflection is. If it's a low GMAT, it might just be, this has been frustrating for me. I've studied, I took a prep course, I studied some more, I took so many practice tests, I never got the score I wanted because it's just something that doesn't come naturally to me, but that this has actually taught me that sometimes things just don't go your way. And I've learned to accept that, and it's made me more mature as a person, and it's made me reflect on times where I was able to succeed even though things didn't initially go my way. So again, what is your learning? What do you take away? Why are you stronger from this initial failure or weakness on your application? And then, most importantly, offset the weakness, right? So despite the low GMAT, despite the low GPA, present data that show why your performance in business school is not a concern. Right? You basically want to say, you should have no doubts about my ability to succeed in a challenging MBA classroom. Here are the data points that I have to show that I can hack it despite my low GPA or despite my low GMAT. Here's the data that I bring to the table, which I'm hoping will offset concerns. Examples of this might be doing quantitative work at work, right? So success performing quantitative tasks in a professional environment, or even in an extracurricular environment, right? So maybe you're managing the finances for a local charity or nonprofit, and you're able to realize some cost savings. That's perfectly relevant. Talk about those examples where you've worked with numbers and been able to spit out results and generate results to benefit your client or your company or the organization you're working with or the individual you're working with, right? So bringing those quantitative examples to the forefront is a great way to offset concerns. Secondly, if you have just a low GMAT or just a low GPA, mention the strength of the other, right? So if you have a low GPA, say, hopefully you can look at my GMAT as evidence that I can perform highly quantitative tasks, right? If you have a low GMAT, say, again, I'm not a good standardized test taker, but you can look back at my college transcript and see that I performed very well in quantitative heavy courses. I did well in accounting and finance and statistics or whatever, right? So if you're weak in one and strong in the other, press home the fact that you are strong in one as evidence to offset the other. And the next, if you've taken additional coursework since college, that's a great way to demonstrate that you have quantitative skill. And in fact, if you haven't done that yet and you have a low GMAT and or a low GPA, I highly recommend that you take some extra courses. Online courses are great, right? Take something from Coursera or MBA Math or something like that. Those are great options for you to take a finance class, an accounting class, a stats class, and show that you can hack it in a quantitatively heavy class. And then the final part, or the final way to offset are certifications, right? So if you have a CPA or a CFA, certainly bring that to the forefront. Those are quantitatively heavy certifications that are really difficult to get. So that's a really great way to say, well, listen, I didn't do great in the GMAT, but I'm a CFA. So clearly I know how to work with numbers. I understand how to crunch numbers to drive results, so on and so forth. So again, those are the 4 steps you want to take in order. I think it's a great way to explain what happened with regards to your GMAT and your GPA, but the key here is really be genuine and don't blame. Don't make excuses, make explanations. Acknowledge that this was something that was your fault, something that it was what it was, and you take responsibility for it. Here's why, here's what I learned, and here's the data that I have to offset concerns that hopefully will convince you that this blemish on my record or my application is not something to be overly concerned about, because once you put me in a business school classroom, I'm going to be just fine. Hopefully that helps.